Ascension, the Russian cosmodrome. I know Nikolai can be a bit down on Soviet technology, but the Ruskies really pulled one out of the bag that time. The Ascension group built a bloody great rocket. It actually worked a treat, too. You remember Gersh? Bald guy? He fought alongside you for a while? I think Richthofen was off somewhere at the time. Anyway, Gersh ran into a little bit of dimensional distortion. Honestly, why do you insist in meddling with stuff you don't understand? Of course, all their experiments just stirred the reality soup even more. You ended up fighting monkeys. Space monkeys at that. As I'm sure you know, monkeys are thieving little bastards. Give them half a chance and they'll nick anything that isn't nailed down. So, in answer to a question Richthofen once asked, I don't love a monkey.
I want to revisit that Ascension radio because when it first came out, a number of us, myself included, got very excited because we had heard it and we heard Monty describe a bald man and we're like, well shoot, a bald man in Ascension. That must be the bald man from the Ascension poster. And this was a great theory that we ran with and it made sense. It was the perfect piece to our puzzle because we have this mysterious bald man from this Ascension poster. And now we have Monty describing a bald man in Ascension, and Gersh is of course an important part of the Ascension storyline. It just made sense for the bald man to be Gersh. And then Monty started talking about us fighting alongside Gersh and something weird like that, and all of this other nonsense, and Richthofen being missing for some reason. We're like, well, that's kind of funny. We have no idea what the heck you're talking about here, Monty. This makes absolutely no sense, because sure, Gersh was in Ascension and Gerard Crovy, and maybe you can make the argument that by being present he was helping fight alongside us, but Richthofen was there, so what are you talking about, other than this being some scene or some adventure that we've yet to experience in the zombie storyline? And we just kind of dropped it from there. We didn't really explore this any further. So now we fast forward about a month later, and the latest issue of the Call of Duty Zombies comic is released, and at the end of the comic, like always, is a new altered loading screen. This time the altered loading screen of Die Rise. I've spoken about this loading screen before, and I explained how this provides us valuable context for these new series of images because you can see what comes before and after it. But I intentionally did not cover what went on within the pages because I had the belief that while this stuff was cool and interesting, we didn't have enough context or information to understand them yet. It was kind of another story for another day type scenario, where we can acknowledge that there's stuff here that's pretty cool, we just don't know what it means. But I think we might actually be able to look back on that Ascension radio and get some answers. So here we have our 4 characters teleporting in front of the house, much like Revelations, except this is different. 1, the house is on Earth rather than in Agartha, and 2, we have 3 of our characters from the Ultimis crew minus Richthofen, and in his place is Ultimis Richthofen, interestingly enough. And this was weird because the only time we've ever seen Ultimis Richthofen with the rest of the Ultimis crew would be the intro of the Giant, but then Ultimis Richthofen shortly joins up with the rest of them. So this didn't really make much sense, but when Monty describes our characters going on adventures without Richthofen, it does harken back to that 2-year period where Richthofen went missing, and it kind of also harkens back to this loading screen right here. We have our characters on an adventure without the Ultimis Richthofen, and in his place, we have Ultimis Richthofen. Now, if we look at the loading screen and we see where they came before they were at the house in Sheffield, you'll notice that they are in Eastern Europe. Now, this map of the world is incredibly inaccurate. Don't use this as a final basis for any projection of the world. However, you can roughly see that it's in Eastern Europe, and even if you line up where the Soviet Union should roughly be, and again, this is a really imperfect drawing of the Earth, you can see that where they are teleporting from is roughly in what was once Soviet territory. Now, we don't know the time in which this loading screen takes place, so we don't actually know whether or not they're in Soviet Russia or not, but we do know they're in that general area. And if we have our 3 characters minus Richthofen teleporting from there, maybe they were just at the scenario that we had Monty talking about, where they were at the Ascension facility fighting alongside Gersh. Primus Richthofen was missing, and that's what's actually happening in that loading screen. That's what they're referencing with that initial starting point of teleportation in the loading screen. And then I guess the next step on their journey was to then go to the house, and maybe they had Ultimis Richthofen accompany them on their journey, and perhaps Ultimis Richthofen was at the Ascension facility before. Now, we don't know that. The Ultimis Richthofen is still a massive mystery, but I do honestly believe that this loading screen, as well as the radio from Ascension in which Monty talks about our characters fighting alongside with Gersh in the Ascension facility without Richthofen, has to relate to this loading screen, because this is the only ever time we've seen our characters teleport from an area that is roughly the Soviet Union without Primus Richthofen. To me, this is the perfect pairing. Now, a lot of people looked at this and said, well, maybe they're teleporting from Garad Krovi, because you go from Garad Krovi to Revelations. And while this works, I don't know if this works as well, because at Garad Krovi, Primus Richthofen was there, not Ascension Richthofen. We've never heard of our characters being at Stalingrad prior to Garad Krovi, and it just doesn't work as well. Like, why would Primus Richthofen, or why would Ultimis Richthofen be at the house? We've never heard of him appearing at the house. So, if you ask me, this doesn't go well. And what I feel is probably the most damning bit of evidence we have is the fact that these two bits of clues came out around the same time. Jason likes to give us information when we're ready for the information, or if he feels we're not ready for the information and the information should be released at a later time, he'll hide that information in a very difficult and time-consuming cipher. Now, they released this radio around the time of Zombie Chronicles, and then conveniently they release a loading screen about a month later that happens to fit very well with that radio, almost as if it was intentional, as if this is something Jason wants us to start talking about and exploring right now, because in the future, in a later Call of Duty game, we might actually start to get a look into this journey of our three characters without Richthofen. We've seen Richthofen's journey as he goes from Origins to the Giant, that 2-year-long period, but maybe in a future Call of Duty, we're going to start to actually see what the rest of the crew is doing, and this is why Jason Blundell is bringing it up now. This is why he just released that radio, and this is why he just released that loading screen. To me, this seems like the best possible explanation, and the fact that they were released around the same time, to me, is one of the biggest clues we have, that they go well together. That's going to wrap things up for this video. I'd like to know what you think. Do you think this is a load of nonsense, or do you think that there might actually be something here? I'd be interested to hear what you guys had to say, because while this is a good theory, there isn't much to take from it. Like, we can't run with it yet because we still don't have enough information, but we can start to put a few pieces of the puzzle together. I'm going to go, though. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and